Hello and welcome back to Rage Gaming in a new Necromancer build video. Today I have the last Bone Spear update for some time now, so I've really pushed to create a long-term incredible build for you guys with that in mind. After this I'm going to be looking into other builds like a proper Summoner or Minion Necromancer build in Season 1, but for this Bone Spear final build I'll be including everything I can, like 2 important uniques, the strongest wrathful heart concept, and the new playstyle to manage that. Using this build I am already able to land consistent 2 million hits at level 75. I'm clearing tier 46 Nightmare dungeons, which does mean level 100 enemies, even 25 levels above me, and my clear times are insanely fast with this damage because you're able to just pop everything in basically one Bone Spear. This is the strongest version of Bone Spear pre-level 100 I've played easily, and as we get into that I want to highlight the fact that we're working with Mobalytics to create written versions of these guides, and this build you'll see today and all the others that we have on the channel, allowing you to easily refer to our builds and check information in a smooth way. Of course you can use the app, or in-game you can just hold tab and Q and that will open the overlay, which as you can see shows a bunch of builds, including the ones that we've made with the extra information and details for you. You can find a link to Mobalytics and the specific build for this video down in the comments below. So yeah, the final Bone Spear build for now. What's the core of this build? There is 2 top tier wrathful hearts you would consider here. One is the extremely popular and strong Barber wrathful heart, which lets you build up damage onto a target, amplify it, and pop it after 2 to 4 seconds of build up. This leads to stupid bursts of damage and is clearly broken, and so I'm convinced they're going to nerf this. It's obviously the best pick for single target, but it does have the downside of slowing your mob clear if you're already killing enemies faster than say 2 to 4 seconds. With Bone Spear and this build, you absolutely are. So it's an incredible alternative to Barber that I don't think's going to get nerfed. That being the Great Feast Necromancer unique Wrathful Heart. This drains 5 essence a second, but in exchange you can deal up to 95% times increased damage. It's insane. But of course then you're dealing with a constant essence drain. Now 5 per second sounds like a lot. As you can see in this footage, it really just isn't. I've increased my max essence so much at this point that 5 essence isn't nearly as bad as it might seem. Then I generate so much essence through my aspects that I completely mitigate that drain while in active combat with even a couple enemies. Basically, I've overcome the essence drain, and in exchange, I've got that consistent 95% times damage increase. That's a big part of how I'm dealing these 2 million plus hits already, and that's only going to scale up more and more as I push to level 100, complete my Paragon, and get higher power level weapons. A cool trick you can kind of do with this build though as well is, at any point you can unequip the Great Feast item whenever you say moving through an area where you're not dealing with combat, and that completely removes the essence drain. You could do that say before a boss fight if you want to wait for Bone Storm's cooldown to come back for any reason, and then just pop the item back on when you're good to go. With that explained then, this is a true endgame build, meaning you need to reach a peak point of enough crit chance and maximum essence to really make this pop off, but essentially that means you've made it through say the Bone Graph Paragon board a good amount at least. Let's explain how this is working and why. Here we are with the skill tree, which I will quickly scroll down as always so you can pause the video and check at any points that you want to, but I'm going to go through it all anyway. Starting with the basic, Bone Splinters all the way to Acolyte's Bone Splinters. This basic gives you crit strike chance for 4 seconds, 8% plus. This build needs as much as possible, so that's great. We're maxing out Bone Spear as the center of the build, and we're going for Paranormal, because once we have the splintering aspect, which you should have, you no longer need to run Supernatural Bone Spear. So extra crit chance here. Of course, we're going 3 out of 3 Unliving Energy to max our essence, and we would be 3 out of 3 imperfectly balanced if they hadn't nerfed this, or it's broken still, can't tell. But 1 point there for now. 3 out of 3 Hued Flesh, we need as much corpses as we can get, and that helps generate them. Down on the next tree, we have 1 point in Corpse Explosion. We just want this for the auto trigger of Corpse Explosion from one of our hearts. This means every time a Corpse Explosion goes off passively, the damage doesn't matter, but it is giving us 6 essence every time, which is major. We want to generate as much as we can get, and it's also giving us the Fueled by Death damage buff. Moving on, we have the passive Death's Embrace, 3 out of 3, reducing close damage we take and improving our damage to close enemies as well. Of course, we want to get Decrepify. This is a slow and a damage reducer up to 20%. Enhanced, it has a lucky hit chance to stun and help reset cooldowns, such as your Bone Storm, which you would like as much as possible. As it is a curse skill, we're taking amplified damage still. Anything that's cursed, we deal 12% times increased damage, which is amazing. Then the next tree, we have Corpse Tendrils at 1 level. We barely press this because it's auto triggering from one of our hearts so often that, yeah, only one level is all that's necessary. We enhance it and go for Plagued to make that generate and spread vulnerability consistently. Then we have the Bone passives. We have 3 out of 3 on Serration, better crit strike chance, 3 out of 3 on Compound Fracture, stacking damage after critically striking 10 times with bone skills, and finally the all-important passive of Evulsion, 15% times increased critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies. As you can see, I'm getting 3 levels of item contribution from my amulet on this one, as it is a major damage increase, as we'll talk about in the gear section. For the ultimate tree, of course, we're going Bone Storm with its full enhancements for the crit strike chance and damage reduction, 3 out of 3 on Standalone and Memento Mori, as this is a sacrifice build. Then we put 3 points into Inspiring Leader. This actually gives us attack speed 12% when we're healthy for 4 seconds. This happens a lot, and we want the attack speed to not only send out bone spears faster, but also use our basic bone splinters to generate essence, which is really important in this build. Lastly, our ossified essence key passive. The higher our essence when we cast our bone spears, the more damage it does. For the Book of the Dead then, we're going Skeletal Warriors for the extra crit chance sacrifice for skirmishers. For the mages, we are going Max Essence. That's the most important thing now, even more than the vulnerable benefits of the cold mages. And lastly, for the Golem, as always, it's Iron Golem Sacrifice for the major critical strike damage increase. And now we move on to the Paragon boards, which as you can see, I've got 3 boards, and I'm about to come down here to my 4th board, which I will explain. Starting with the starter board though, we make our way from the bottom up to the right to Prime, and then make our way up to the Glyph socket, where we have Control. Control is a major damage increase, and one that we want as soon as possible. On our starter board, even when it's not level 15, you can easily get the 40 intelligence required, and that will majorly improve your damage. Anything that's slowed or chilled, such as Decrepify, that's a 10% times increased damage. If it's stunned or frozen, that's double at 20% times. Of course, we are Corpse Tendril is stunning, and with Decrepify slowing, so this is a major damage improvement. It also improves damage to crowd control enemies per level of intelligence, so a major improvement there. Easy to get 40 intelligence on the starting board. We're also picking up preservation and also knowledge, leaving on the left and up to the next board. Here, obviously, we have the Bone Graft board, which I've orientated to get to Bone Graft on a legendary node as soon as possible, which I would recommend you do. This improves your maximum essence and your bone skill damage, so it's incredibly important for the build. From the bottom and entering the board, we head straight to the right and move our way over to Bone Graft. After we've got that, we will then pick up Entomb and also come up and around to pick up the magic node for the crit strike damage of bone skills. Then we'll come back to the start, coming up and then going left to reinvigorate, further improving our max essence and providing us with essence on kill. The magic nodes around that are vital because they give us more max essence and more essence on kill. Then we'll work our way straight up to Calcified for major critical strike damage with bone skill benefits. The magic nodes around it are also incredible, and we'll come to the right to make sure we come to Tenacity for extra life and armor, and again the magic nodes around that providing us with more of both. Coming up to the left though, we reach the Glyph, where we have Exploit as a second glyph. This improves your vulnerable damage, and its secondary effect causes damage dealt to vulnerable enemies to increase your damage up to 10% times for 6 seconds if you keep it going. So a major stacking benefit of dealing vulnerable damage, which we are always doing. You need 25 dex to get this activated, and as you can see, I've done it like this. But if you don't have level 15 of this glyph, you may have to organize yours slightly differently. But I make sure to come up to Shaper of Bone to get the bone skill damage benefits, and there is +7 dexterity by that, which is really nice. Then we leave the glyph down to the bottom left and come to our 3rd board, which is of course the Flesh Eater board. We are constantly consuming corpses through explosions and also tendriling all the time automatically from our heart. So every time we deal that to 5 corpses, we get a 40% times increased damage bonus for 6 seconds, leading again to those 2 million plus hits, which is happening often during mob clear. I rotate this board to get that legendary node close to us, heading down to Stifle first for its beneficial damage to injured enemies and crit strike damage. The magic nodes around it are amazing, so we want to pick up all of those. And on the way to the left here, we come up and pick up the actual legendary node itself. Then we'll work our way left and up to the glyph, where I have Territorial, another one that requires 25 dex to activate. It improves our damage to close enemies and gives us a 10% damage reduction against close enemies. This is a fantastic way to reduce incoming damage, and one that I would recommend you put on your starter board if you are taking too much damage and need more survivability. But as I've made it to my 3rd glyph socket, I can put it on my 3rd glyph socket at this point, meaning I can run Control easily. As you can see, I make sure to pick up Targeted for further damage to elites and the magic nodes around it. And then as mentioned, for my 4th board, the next one, I'm going to make my way down to this gate here. Once I'm on that gate, I'm going to go for the Scent of Death board, picking up Scent of Death as soon as possible, and I'll be going for the Essence glyph on my 4th board glyph socket. But that's what I've done so far and my plans for the next few points. Now moving on, it's time for the gear section, where I'm going to start with the Malignant Hearts. Firstly, our wrathful heart of choice. As I've mentioned, this is the all-important unique wrathful heart for Necromancers, the Great Feast. And as you can see, a low roll will reduce the essence drained per minion, but a roll for that doesn't matter at all if you're doing a sacrifice build and not running minions, and that means 5 essence per second, no matter whether you roll it bad or good. Where the roll matters is how much damage increase you actually get in exchange for the essence drain, and as you can see, the highest one you can get is 95% times, which is massive. As this is a wrathful heart, you can socket this into any of your jewelry. You will just need 2 vicious slots in your jewelry, and then the third slot can be whatever the wrathful heart goes into. For one of those vicious slots then, I am running the all-important Sacrilegious ridiculous vicious heart. This triggers the automatic corpse explosion and the automatic corpse tendrils whenever you go near corpses. It has a priority order, and that it will always trigger corpse tendrils first every 3 seconds, and then otherwise it just uses corpse explosion. The roll for this doesn't matter at all. Basically, a better roll will reduce the damage less of the corpse explosions, but we don't care because they're not dealing any damage anyway. We're just getting the passive benefits and the essence generation of that, so even a bad roll on this doesn't matter at all. The other vicious slot then is the very important Tempting Fate Vicious Heart. This provides much higher crit damage in exchange for much lower non-crit damage dealt. Since we are running a next to or literally 100% crit build as Bone Spear, the negatives of this don't really matter to us. You can get up to 80% plus critical strike damage, which is very impactful early days, but does become less and less impactful, say, as you get to the true end game and have really high crit strike damage anyway. This is additive, not multiplier. It would be better long term if it was multiplier. So say a level 100 version of this build, I might even consider replacing this, but for now it is doing wonders. Next up, we have the actual gear itself then. Now I'm going to say that this is an endgame build, so it requires some really endgame stuff, such as 2 uniques. Firstly, the helmet, Deathless Visage, incredible Bone Spear specific unique, improving the damage of Bone Spear by leaving an echo that deals damage after the Bone Spear travels. This is super good. If you do not have this, there's a third defensive aspect you could run on your helmet slot, which I'll explain in a moment. The other unique is the boots, Penitent Greaves. This is really important. You leave behind a trail of frost that chills enemies, and that not only improves your damage overall, giving us on a top roll 10% times more damage to those chilled enemies, but chilled also benefits one of our aspects to generate essence. So I'll explain that aspect right now. It is the resource aspect of Umbral, 4 of your primary resource when you crowd control an enemy. So when I decrepify them, when I chill them, when I corpse tendril slow or stun them, I am generating 4 essence on every single enemy. In a group of mobs, that is next to infinite essence generation, especially with Penitent Greaves constantly reapplying chill. So it's kind of an insane combo with Umbral specifically, and also it's one of the few ways to improve your damage via the boot slot. So these two are major damage increases. For our defensive aspects, on the chest piece, we have Might. Up to 6 seconds of 20% damage reduction every time we use a basic attack. In fact, if you bone splinters nothing like the air, it will trigger this 6-second benefit, so you can preemptively put this damage reduction on before even being in combat. It is incredible, and easily arguably one of the best defensive aspects in the game. Other defensive aspect we have in the build is of course the newly nerfed Disobedience, which remains absolutely incredible for the amount of armor you get. It's not as good, but it's still incredible. The other defensive aspect you can consider is Shielding Storm. Bone Storm will generate a barrier up to 5% of your base life each time it damages an enemy, so it becomes a massive, incredible barrier that lasts roughly 10 seconds during your Bone Storm. Basically, you're unkillable while Bone Storm's going, which is awesome, but Bone Storm has a 1-minute cooldown. We are reducing that cooldown slightly in this build, but not enough to say that this is going to be active too much. If you were to run Shielding Storm instead of, say, Might, or instead of, say, Disobedience, you would be more tanky while Bone Storm's up and much more vulnerable when it's not, which is half the time. So in my opinion, Shielding Storm in this build is not consistent enough to warrant picking it over Might or Disobedience. But if you wanted more defense, or you didn't have the unique helmet, then you could run Shielding Storm as your third defensive, and that would also be a great option. Then we have the gloves. Here we have the Serration aspect, which is giving us up to 40% improved damage on our bone skills. Basically, this works in unison with your Ossified Essence key passive to make it stronger. It's incredible. So good that you might even consider putting it on your amulet. But instead of having it on my amulet, I have Grasping Veins, as we want as much crit strike chance in the build as possible, and thanks to the Sacrilegious heart, we're constantly triggering corpse explosions. So we're constantly benefiting from nearly 30% increased critical strike chance and 60% times bonus critical strike damage to those afflicted by corpse tendrils. I believe this is the best option. It makes your damage more bursty. Since we're constantly corpse tendriling thanks to the new heart, I think it's best on your amulet overall. As earlier explained, we are using the aspect of Umbral on our ring. This is a vital way to generate loads of primary resource, but of course the other one is still exposed flesh, giving you up to 50 essence when hitting a vulnerable enemy with bone skills on a 10% lucky hit chance. As you AoE with Bone Spear hitting vulnerable targets, this happens all the time. 50 essence each time is insane. And so between exposed flesh and Umbral, with this build and setup, I am generating an absolutely massive amount of essence, which is vital to contend with the wrathful heart that is draining 5 essence a second. With this setup, I'm able to overcome that essence drain, and that is why we use all of this. Finally, obviously on our two-hand sword specifically, we have the splintering aspect. Ideally, you want a two-hand sword because this has a unique passive of critical strike damage, which is just better than a scythe. But if you have a higher eye level two-hand scythe, then fair enough. When it comes to what you want on your gear then, the gloves, you're going to want 4 levels of Bone Spear as always. On the amulet, you're looking for ranks of Evulsion. As you can see, you can get up to 3 like me. Evulsion is what's massively improving your damage to vulnerable targets, so it's just the most valuable. For damage improving specific affixes, you're looking for as much crit chance on everything that you can get to be as close to 100% crit chance at all times. Second to that, you'll be looking for max essence on everything. And you can also benefit from general essence generation, whatever form that takes. But after that, you're looking for crit damage, vulnerable damage, and lucky hit, or any other damage improvers under those. For damage reduction, it's the same as always. Raw damage reduction, armor, and health are top tier picks, and then things like close and far damage, those are also beneficial. As you can see for our gems, I'm going for damage reduction while control impaired. This comes from topazes. The reason we run that over the rubies that provide maximum health is because we are not running Blood Mist in this build to run Decrepify. We want to put these topazes in to prevent us from dying if we ever get stunned, since we can't break out of stuns with Blood Mist. And then in the weapon, as always, we're improving our damage to vulnerable enemies with better crit strike damage via the emeralds that go into the weapons as always. When it comes to playing this build, it is pretty much the same as normal Bone Spear gameplay. You're looking to keep Decrepify on the enemies that will probably hurt you, or survive a single Bone Spear hit because it does improve your damage. In most cases, even when I'm doing like 15 levels above me, I am just throwing Bone Spears and moving on with my life, avoiding damage through playing at range, and moving around the battle to auto-trigger corpse tendrils as much as possible. I only really use Bone Storm when I want to survive incoming damage that looks nasty, or blast, say, strong elites, so I intentionally use it at the right time when I'm like, I need to be strong right now. Remember, the more you move through the battle, applying your chill, applying Decrepify, CCing targets in general, the more essence you're going to generate, and that's going to really help. But again, as a reminder, if there's ever a point where you're moving through a dungeon and not in combat and you're watching your essence just drain, take the whatever jewelry slot that you have the Wrathful Heart on off. Just take it off. It will completely stop the drain until you put it back on. So say you're waiting before a boss fight to just get Bone Storm back off cooldown, or you're moving back through a dungeon that you sort of missed path, you can just take it off and then put it back on when you're ready to go again. But there you have it. That is my complete sort of final form of Bone Spear that I'll be doing for Season 1 for a little bit of time. That's because we're well overdue now. I've been hardcore grinding to get to say level 80 roughly, so that I have enough Paragon points to really show you endgame versions of builds. I should now roughly have everything I need to start testing and showcasing Bloodlance builds, Minion builds, the other meta builds, and see what's really possible in Season 1. I hope that you can use this Bone Spear build to level and power level really effectively. It is ultimately the strongest build that Necromancer has, and this version is obviously ridiculous. So until next time, I've been Hollow, you've been you. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.